The autumn rain hammered against the windows of Kensington Palace as Kate sat alone in her private study. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the ivory paper, feeling the weight of every word she had carefully chosen. This letter would be her final message to William, a goodbye that she hoped would help him understand her decision to step away from royal life forever. Kate had spent months wrestling with this choice. The constant media scrutiny, the rigid protocols, and most painfully, the growing distance between her and William had become unbearable. She loved him deeply, but their marriage had become a performance for the public rather than a genuine partnership. The spark that had ignited their romance at university seemed like a distant memory, buried under layers of duty and expectation. In the letter, Kate poured out her heart about their early days together. She wrote about their first meeting at university, when William was just another student trying to blend in, and she was the girl from a middle-class family who never imagined she would fall in love with a prince. She described their secret dates, the way he made her laugh until her sides ached, and how he had promised her that their love would always come first, no matter what royal obligations demanded. She wrote about their wedding day, how magical it had felt to walk down the aisle of Westminster Abbey, believing that love could conquer any challenge. The whole world had watched as they exchanged vows, and she had felt like the luckiest woman alive. But gradually, the fairy tale had begun to crumble. The endless royal engagements left little time for them to simply be husband and wife. Every conversation seemed to revolve around schedules, appearances, and maintaining the right public image. Kate included memories of their children, how George, Charlotte, and Louis had brought joy but also additional pressure. She wanted to be present for every milestone, every scraped knee, every bedtime story, but royal duties often pulled her away. She wrote about watching other mothers at school events, envying their freedom to focus entirely on their children without cameras documenting every interaction. The letter also touched on her struggles with anxiety and depression, feelings she had hidden behind her polished public smile. The constant criticism of her fashion choices, her family background, and even her parenting decisions had slowly eroded her confidence. She felt trapped in a golden cage, beautiful from the outside but suffocating within. Kate admitted that she had tried to discuss these feelings with William, but he seemed unable to understand her perspective, always reminding her of her duty to the crown. She wrote about the loneliness that had crept into their relationship. Even when they were together, William seemed distant, preoccupied with his role as future king. Their conversations had become perfunctory, focused on logistics rather than emotions. She missed the man who used to hold her hand during scary movies, who would surprise her with handwritten notes, who made her feel like she was the most important person in his world. Kate described her growing friendship with several women outside royal circles, successful professionals who had shown her that it was possible to live authentically without sacrificing one's values. Through them, she had begun to rediscover parts of herself that she had suppressed to fit the royal mold. She realized that she could make a meaningful difference in the world without being confined by centuries-old traditions that no longer felt relevant. The letter revealed her plans to quietly separate from William and gradually withdraw from public life. She had already secured a small cottage in the countryside where she could raise their children away from constant scrutiny. Kate emphasized that this decision was not made lightly or in anger, but from a deep understanding that she could no longer continue living a life that felt increasingly false. She assured William that she would always love him and that her decision was not a reflection of his failings as a husband or father. Kate acknowledged his dedication to his royal duties and his genuine desire to serve his country. However, she needed him to understand that she could not sacrifice her mental health and authentic self for the sake of appearances any longer. The letter included practical arrangements for their children, proposing a custody schedule that would allow William to remain active in their lives while giving Kate the freedom to provide them with a more normal childhood. She had already spoken with lawyers discreetly and had financial plans that would not burden the royal family or create public scandal. Kate wrote about her hopes for William's future, encouraging him to find someone who could genuinely embrace royal life and support him in ways that she no longer could. She wanted him to experience the kind of partnership where both people felt fulfilled and authentic, something their marriage had gradually lost despite their best efforts. As she concluded the letter, Kate reflected on the woman she had been when they first met and the woman she had become through their years together. She expressed gratitude for the experiences, both joyful and challenging, that had shaped her into someone stronger and more self-aware. The letter ended with a promise that she would always cherish their beautiful memories and would do everything possible to ensure their children knew they were loved by both parents. Kate sealed the letter in an envelope, writing William's name in her careful handwriting. She placed it in her jewelry box, planning to give it to him after their upcoming public appearance together. This would give them both time to maintain dignity while privately processing the end of their marriage. She had no idea that this letter, containing her most private thoughts and feelings, would soon become the center of a devastating royal scandal. The next morning brought typical royal chaos as Kate prepared for a charity event alongside William, and the three of them had maintained a professional relationship over the years, though Kate had always sensed an undercurrent of tension. Had never quite accepted Kate as William's wife, perhaps viewing her as an outsider who had disrupted the established royal order. Their interactions remained polite but distant, like actors playing roles in a long-running drama. During the charity event, Kate noticed sharp attention to every detail of her behavior and appearance. It was as if the older woman was collecting evidence of Kate's unsuitability for royal life. Kate performed her duties flawlessly, engaging with guests, delivering her speech with practiced grace, and maintaining the radiant smile that the public expected. Inside, however, she felt like she was saying goodbye to this world with each handshake and photograph. After the event, exhaustion overwhelmed Kate as they returned to Kensington Palace. She excused herself early, claiming a headache, and retreated to her private quarters. The emotional weight of writing the letter and knowing that her life was about to change dramatically had left her feeling drained. She fell into a deep sleep, unaware that had noticed her distracted behavior throughout the day. Unknown to Kate, had developed suspicions about potential marital problems between William and Kate. As someone who had experienced her own share of royal relationship drama, possessed a keen instinct for detecting cracks in seemingly perfect facades. She had noticed the subtle signs, the lack of spontaneous affection between the couple, their careful coordination to avoid being alone together, and Kate's increasing tendency to appear lost in thought during public appearances. That evening, while Kate slept, and William attended a late meeting about upcoming royal engagements, made a decision that would have catastrophic consequences. Using her position and access within the palace, she entered Kate's private study under the pretense of retrieving a book she had lent her months earlier. Its real intention was to look for any evidence that might confirm her suspicions about the state of William and Kate's marriage. The jewelry box sat innocently on Kate's desk, its antique silver surface reflecting the moonlight streaming through the windows. Had not intended to search through Kate's personal belongings, but the sight of the sealed envelope with William's name proved irresistible. Her curiosity overrode any sense of propriety or respect for privacy. With trembling fingers, she carefully opened the envelope and began reading Kate's deeply personal letter. As read Kate's honest assessment of royal life and her decision to leave, shock gave way to calculating anger. This letter contained explosive information that could damage the monarchy's reputation and potentially alter the line of succession. More personally, Kate's departure would reflect poorly on her ability to maintain harmony within the royal family and could undermine her own position as future queen consort. Realized that she held enormous power in her hands. The letter revealed Kate's vulnerabilities, her escape plans, and her true feelings about royal life. Instead of respecting Kate's privacy and returning the letter immediately, made a choice that would haunt everyone involved. She decided to destroy the evidence of Kate's intended departure, believing that she could somehow prevent the situation from unfolding as Kate had planned. In a moment of panic and misguided protectiveness toward the royal family, took the letter to the fireplace in the nearby sitting room. She watched as the ivory paper curled and blackened in the flames, Kate's carefully chosen words disappearing into ash and smoke. Convinced herself that she was protecting everyone involved, preventing a scandal that would devastate William and damage the monarchy's reputation. However, had not considered the emotional devastation that her actions would cause. She had destroyed Kate's attempt to communicate honestly with her husband, eliminating any possibility of a dignified and private resolution to their marriage. Instead of preventing pain, had ensured that the truth would emerge in the most hurtful way possible, setting in motion a series of events that would ultimately destroy the very relationships she thought she was protecting. Kate woke the next morning with a strange sense of unease, though she could not immediately identify its source. The autumn sunlight filtered through her bedroom curtains, and for a moment she allowed herself to imagine waking up in the countryside cottage she had written about in her letter. Soon, she reminded herself, that dream would become reality. She had planned to give William the letter that evening, after their children were asleep and they could have an honest conversation about their future. As Kate went through her morning routine, she felt lighter than she had in months. The decision to leave had been agonizing, but now that she had committed to it, a sense of peace settled over her. She spent extra time with George, Charlotte, and Louis during breakfast, treasuring these moments before their lives would change dramatically. The children chattered about their school activities and weekend plans, blissfully unaware that their mother was preparing to upend their world in pursuit of authenticity and happiness. William appeared distracted during breakfast, scrolling through his phone and responding to messages about upcoming royal obligations. Kate watched him with a mixture of sadness and understanding. He was a good man caught in an impossible position, torn between his love for his family and his duty to the crown. She hoped that eventually he would understand her decision and perhaps even find relief in it. Their marriage had become a burden for both of them, though neither had been brave enough to acknowledge it until now. After breakfast, Kate retreated to her study to review the letter one final time before giving it to William. She wanted to ensure that every word conveyed her feelings accurately and that her message would help him understand her perspective. As she approached her desk, however, something felt wrong. The jewelry box sat in its usual place, but something about its position seemed different, as if someone had moved it slightly. Kate's heart began to race as she opened the jewelry box and searched for the envelope. She checked every compartment, moved aside her grandmother's pearls and her wedding earrings, but the letter was nowhere to be found. Panic seized her as she searched the entire study, checking drawers, looking under papers, and examining every possible hiding place. The letter containing her most private thoughts and her plans for the future had vanished completely. Several possibilities raced through Kate's mind. Perhaps she had misplaced it, though she distinctly remembered putting it in the jewelry box the previous evening. Maybe William had found it accidentally, though that seemed unlikely given his busy schedule and his general respect for her privacy. The most disturbing possibility was that someone else had taken it, someone with access to her private quarters and a reason to search through her belongings. Kate's hands shook as she considered the implications. The letter contained sensitive information about royal family dynamics, her personal struggles, and her escape plans. In the wrong hands, this information could be used against her or could be leaked to the media, creating the exact scandal she had hoped to avoid. She had written the letter as a private communication between husband and wife, never imagining that others might read her intimate thoughts. Trying to remain calm, Kate began a systematic search of her quarters. She checked every room, every drawer, every possible location where the letter might have ended up. As the hours passed and her search proved fruitless, fear gave way to a sick certainty that someone had deliberately taken her letter. But who would have both the access and the motivation to invade her privacy so completely? The realization struck her like a physical blow when she remembered unusually attentive behavior during the previous day's charity event. Kate had noticed the older woman's sharp observations, her careful attention to every interaction between William and Kate. She recalled how had lingered near her study the evening before, claiming to look for a book, though Kate could not remember lending her anything recently. Confronting this possibility filled Kate with dread and anger. If had indeed taken the letter, it represented a violation of trust that went beyond anything Kate had experienced in her years as a royal family member. The letter contained her deepest fears, her most private thoughts about her marriage, and her carefully laid plans for protecting her children during the transition. Having this information in hands felt like being emotionally naked before someone who had never shown her genuine warmth or understanding. Kate knew she needed to address the situation immediately, but she also understood the delicate nature of accusing without concrete proof. Any confrontation would need to be handled carefully to avoid creating additional drama or misunderstandings. She decided to approach directly but diplomatically, hoping that an honest conversation might resolve the situation quickly and quietly. Finding required navigating the complex social protocols that governed interactions within the royal household. Kate could not simply demand an immediate meeting without raising suspicions among staff and other family members. Instead, she arranged to encounter during the afternoon tea service, a regular social occasion that would provide natural cover for their conversation. When Kate entered the drawing room where afternoon tea was being served, she found engaged in conversation with several ladies-in-waiting. The older woman's demeanor appeared completely normal, showing no signs of guilt or unusual behavior. Kate waited patiently for an appropriate moment to request a private word, her anxiety growing with each passing minute. She studied his face for any hint that she knew about the missing letter, but found only the same polished composure that maintained in all social situations. Finally, Kate approached with a carefully casual request to speak privately about plans for an upcoming charity function. Agreed graciously, and they moved to a smaller sitting room where they could talk without being overheard. Kate's heart pounded as she searched for the right words to begin this delicate conversation without making accusations that could escalate into a major family conflict. Kate started by mentioning that she had misplaced an important personal document and was retracing her steps from the previous day. She watched his reaction carefully, looking for any sign of recognition or guilt. Responded with apparent concern, asking if she could help search for the missing item and suggesting that palace staff might have moved it during their cleaning duties. As their conversation continued, Kate became increasingly frustrated by seemingly genuine ignorance about the missing letter. Either was an exceptionally skilled actress, or Kate had wrongly suspected her of involvement in the letter's disappearance. The uncertainty was almost worse than knowing for certain that had taken it, because it left Kate without a clear path forward for recovering her private thoughts. Eventually, Kate decided to take a more direct approach. She mentioned that the missing document was extremely personal and that its disappearance had caused her significant distress. She emphasized that the contents were meant only for William and that any unauthorized reading would represent a serious violation of her privacy. Kate studied his reaction to these words, hoping to detect some sign that would confirm or deny her suspicions. His response was perfectly appropriate, expressing sympathy for Kate's distress and offering to help search for the document in any way possible. She suggested that Kate might want to inform palace security about the missing item, particularly if it contained sensitive information that could be problematic if it fell into the wrong hands. This suggestion struck Kate as particularly cruel if it had indeed taken the letter, but she could not determine whether the words were meant to be helpful or mocking. As their conversation concluded without resolution, Kate felt more frustrated and anxious than ever. The missing letter represented hours of emotional labor, her carefully considered thoughts about their marriage, and her plans for creating a better life for herself and her children. Without it, she would need to have a much more difficult conversation with William, trying to explain her decision without the benefit of the thoughtful written communication she had crafted. That evening, Kate made a difficult decision. She would tell William about her intention to leave, even without the letter to help explain her reasoning. She had hoped that reading her thoughts would help him understand her perspective gradually, but now she would need to deliver the shocking news in person and hope that he would listen with an open mind and heart. Kate found William in his private office, reviewing documents related to upcoming royal engagements. She asked if they could talk privately about their relationship, a request that immediately captured his attention. William set aside his papers and invited her to sit down, though his expression suggested that he was not prepared for a serious emotional conversation after a long day of official duties. Taking a deep breath, Kate began to explain her feelings about their marriage and royal life. She tried to recreate the thoughtful tone of her letter, describing her growing sense of isolation and her belief that they had both changed in ways that made their relationship unsustainable. William listened with increasing shock and confusion, clearly unprepared for the magnitude of what Kate was telling him. As Kate spoke, she watched William's expression change from confusion to disbelief to devastation. He interrupted her several times to ask questions, trying to understand how their marriage had reached this point without his awareness. Kate explained that she had tried to discuss these feelings before, but that their busy schedules and royal obligations had made deep emotional conversations nearly impossible. William's response revealed the depth of his surprise and hurt. He had believed that despite their challenges, their marriage remained fundamentally strong. He acknowledged that they had been distant lately, but attributed it to temporary stresses rather than fundamental incompatibility. Hearing that Kate had been planning to leave for months left him feeling betrayed and confused about his own understanding of their relationship. The conversation continued late into the night, with both Kate and William struggling to communicate their feelings effectively. Without the letter to provide context and explanation, Kate found herself repeating points and trying to help William understand the gradual evolution of her thoughts. William asked repeatedly why she had not shared these feelings earlier, and Kate tried to explain that she had attempted to do so, though perhaps not clearly enough. As they talked, Kate realized that the missing letter had contained not just her decision to leave, but also expressions of love, gratitude, and hope for William's future happiness. Without those softening elements, her verbal explanation came across as harsher and more critical than she had intended. She found herself trying to convey the nuanced emotions of her written words through spontaneous conversation, a nearly impossible task given the charged emotional atmosphere. William struggled to process the information Kate was sharing, asking questions about their children, their public obligations, and the practical implications of separation. Kate tried to answer his concerns while also helping him understand that her decision came from a place of love rather than anger or resentment. She wanted him to see that she was trying to create a situation where both of them could find genuine happiness, even if it meant ending their marriage. The conversation ended without resolution, with both William and Kate emotionally exhausted and overwhelmed. William asked for time to process what Kate had told him, and Kate agreed, though she emphasized that her decision was final and that they needed to begin planning for their future separation. As they parted that night, both felt the weight of their changing relationship and the uncertainty of what would come next. Unknown to both of them, the missing letter had already been destroyed, and the person responsible for its disappearance would soon face the consequences of her actions. The truth about what had happened to Kate's careful explanation would eventually emerge, but not before causing even more pain and misunderstanding for everyone involved. The days following Kate's conversation with William were filled with an uncomfortable tension that seemed to permeate every corner of Kensington Palace. William moved through his royal duties like a man in a daze, struggling to maintain his public composure while privately grappling with the shocking revelation that his wife wanted to leave him. He found himself analyzing every interaction they had shared over the past months, searching for signs that he had missed or misunderstood. Kate, meanwhile, felt both relief and anxiety after finally sharing her decision with William. The relief came from no longer carrying the secret alone, but the anxiety stemmed from William's reaction and the uncertainty about how they would move forward. She had expected hurt and confusion, but William's complete shock suggested that their communication problems had been even worse than she realized. She began to wonder if her missing letter might have helped bridge this gap in understanding. Neither William nor Kate shared the details of their conversation with other family members, but the change in their dynamic was impossible to hide completely. Staff members noticed the increased formality between them, the way they avoided being alone together, and the careful politeness that had replaced their natural interactions. Palace staff had long been trained to ignore personal dramas, but the tension between the future king and queen was palpable. Observed these changes with growing unease. She had expected that destroying Kate's letter would somehow prevent the marriage crisis from unfolding, but it was clear that Kate had found another way to communicate her feelings to William. The destruction of the letter now seemed not only wrong but also pointless, since it had not achieved its intended purpose of protecting the royal family from scandal. As the days passed, found herself haunted by guilt over her actions. She had never intended to cause harm, but she began to understand that her interference might have made the situation worse rather than better. The letter had clearly been important to Kate, and its disappearance had likely caused additional distress during an already difficult time. Struggled with whether to confess her actions or to remain silent and hope that the truth never emerged. The weight of her secret became increasingly unbearable as watched William struggle with the aftermath of Kate's announcement. She could see that he was devastated and confused, trying to understand how his marriage had reached this point without his awareness. Realized that Kate's letter might have provided context and explanation that could have helped William process the situation more effectively. Meanwhile, Kate continued to search for her missing letter, though she had begun to lose hope of finding it. She had discreetly questioned staff members about whether they had seen any documents in her study, but no one admitted to moving or finding anything. The mystery of the letter's disappearance added another layer of stress to an already overwhelming situation. Kate began to suspect that someone had deliberately taken the letter, though she could not understand why anyone would want to read her private thoughts or interfere with her marriage. The violation of her privacy felt almost as painful as the marital problems that had prompted the letter in the first place. She found herself wondering who could have accessed her study and what they might have done with such sensitive information. William's attempts to understand Kate's perspective were complicated by his lack of context about her thought process. During their conversation, Kate had tried to explain months of gradual realization and careful consideration, but without her written words to provide structure and nuance, her verbal explanation had seemed sudden and harsh. William found himself wishing that Kate had found a way to share her feelings more gradually, unaware that she had tried to do exactly that through her missing letter. As William struggled to process Kate's decision, he began to question everything he thought he knew about their relationship. He reviewed their recent interactions, looking for signs of unhappiness that he had missed. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that Kate had indeed tried to express concerns about their marriage, but he had been too focused on royal duties to listen effectively. The realization that he had failed as a husband hit William like a physical blow. He began to understand that Kate's decision was not a sudden whim, but the result of months of feeling unheard and unsupported. His guilt over his inattentiveness combined with his shock at Kate's announcement to create a perfect storm of emotional devastation. William's performance of his public duties began to suffer as he struggled with the private crisis. Staff members and other royal family members noticed his distraction and occasional irritability, though no one dared to ask direct questions about the cause. The pressure of maintaining a perfect public image while dealing with personal turmoil became almost overwhelming. During this tense period, William found themselves thrown together more frequently due to their shared royal obligations. Watched William's pain with increasing guilt, knowing that she possessed information that might help him understand Kate's perspective better. She had read Kate's expressions of love and gratitude alongside her decision to leave, elements that had been lost in Kate's verbal explanation. The guilt of her secret knowledge began to affect her own behavior. She found herself offering unusual support and sympathy to William, trying to compensate for her role in his current suffering without revealing her actions. Her attempts to help, however, only served to remind her of the document she had destroyed and the pain she had inadvertently caused. Kate noticed changed behavior, but interpreted it as awkwardness about the marital crisis rather than guilt over specific actions. The two women's interactions became even more strained, with Kate feeling that was judging her decision while struggled with her secret knowledge of Kate's true feelings. As the royal family prepared for a series of public appearances, the tension between William and Kate became increasingly difficult to hide. They had always been skilled at presenting a united front for the cameras, but their recent conversations had made such performances feel dishonest and painful. Both dreaded the upcoming events, knowing that they would need to pretend happiness while privately dealing with the collapse of their marriage. The media began to notice subtle changes in William and Kate's public interactions, though most attributed any stiffness to the pressures of royal life rather than marital problems. Royal correspondents were trained to read body language and facial expressions, but William and Kate's professionalism initially masked the severity of their private difficulties. During one particularly challenging public appearance, Kate found herself struggling to maintain her composure. The event required her and William to present awards to couples celebrating long and successful marriages, a bitter irony given their current situation. As she listened to speeches about love, commitment, and partnership, Kate felt the weight of her own failed marriage and her decision to prioritize honesty over duty. William, too, found the event emotionally difficult. Hearing about other couples' successful partnerships reminded him of his own failings as a husband and the dreams he and Kate had once shared. He began to understand more clearly why Kate felt their marriage had become unsustainable, though the knowledge brought no comfort. After the event, William and Kate returned to Kensington Palace in silence, both emotionally drained by the performance they had just delivered. The contrast between their public image and private reality had never felt more stark or painful. They were becoming strangers who happened to share a title and a home, and the distance between them seemed to grow larger each day. That evening, William made a decision that would change everything. He approached privately, hoping that she might have insights about Kate's state of mind or suggestions for how he might salvage his marriage. William had always respected its experience and wisdom, and he desperately needed guidance from someone who understood both royal life and the complexities of relationships. William confided in about Kate's decision to leave, sharing his confusion and pain while asking for her advice. He described their recent conversation and his struggle to understand how their marriage had deteriorated so dramatically without his awareness. William admitted that he felt like Kate's decision had come from nowhere, though he was beginning to realize that he had probably missed important signs along the way. As William spoke, felt the full weight of her actions crashing down upon her. She realized that Kate had clearly spent considerable time and emotional energy crafting a letter that would help William understand her perspective gradually and kindly. By destroying that letter, had forced Kate to deliver devastating news without the careful explanation she had prepared. The knowledge that William's current anguish was partly her fault became unbearable. Understood that her interference had not only violated Kate's privacy, but had also made William's pain worse by depriving him of the context and gentle explanation that Kate had provided in her letter. Her well-intentioned attempt to protect the family had instead caused additional suffering for everyone involved. Faced an impossible choice. She could continue to hide her actions and allow William to suffer without the understanding that Kate's letter might have provided, or she could confess her interference and risk damaging her relationship with both William and Kate permanently. Either choice would cause pain, but began to realize that the truth might be less damaging than continued deception. As William waited for her response to his request for advice, struggled with the words that would reveal her terrible secret. She understood that confessing would likely end any possibility of a relationship with Kate and might damage her standing with William as well. However, she also recognized that allowing William to continue suffering without all the information was equally wrong. The moment stretched between them as gathered the courage to tell William what she had done. She could see the pain in his eyes and knew that her confession would initially make that pain worse. But she also hoped that eventually, the truth might help him heal and understand Kate's perspective more completely. Taking a deep breath, began to speak the words that would shatter William's trust and reveal the shocking truth about Kate's missing letter. She had no idea that her confession would lead to consequences far more devastating than anything she had imagined when she made her fateful decision to destroy Kate's final message. Hands trembled as she looked at William's expectant face, knowing that her next words would change everything between them forever. The weight of her secret had become unbearable, especially seeing William's genuine anguish over his marriage crisis. She had convinced herself that destroying Kate's letter would protect the royal family, but now she understood that her actions had only made the situation worse. Taking a shaky breath, began her confession in a barely audible whisper. She told William that she had something terrible to admit, something that would likely make him hate her forever. William's expression shifted from concern to alarm as he sensed the gravity of whatever was about to reveal. He had expected advice about his marriage, not a confession that would clearly devastate him further. Explained that several nights ago, she had entered Kate's private study looking for evidence of marital problems. She admitted to William that she had suspected tension between him and Kate and had hoped to understand the situation better so she could help. Her voice broke as she described finding the sealed letter addressed to him and making the terrible decision to read it without permission. William's face went completely white as words sank in. The betrayal of his trust was staggering, but he forced himself to listen as continued her confession. She described reading Kate's deeply personal thoughts about their marriage, her struggles with royal life, and her carefully planned decision to leave. His voice shook as she admitted that the letter had been filled with love and understanding alongside Kate's decision to separate. The most devastating revelation came when confessed that she had destroyed the letter, believing that eliminating it would somehow prevent Kate from leaving. William listened in horrified silence, as described watching Kate's words burn in the fireplace, reducing hours of careful thought and emotional honesty to ash and smoke. She had eliminated Kate's gentle explanation and loving context, leaving only the harsh reality of her decision to abandon their marriage. William's reaction was swift and explosive. He stood up abruptly, his face contorting with rage and disbelief as the full impact of his actions hit him. She had not only violated Kate's privacy in the most intimate way possible, but she had also stolen his opportunity to understand his wife's perspective through her own words. The letter might have helped him process Kate's decision with greater understanding and less confusion. Tried to explain her reasoning, describing her panic about potential scandal and her misguided belief that destroying the letter would protect everyone involved. She emphasized that she had acted out of love for the royal family, not malice toward Kate or William. However, her explanations only seemed to fuel William's anger as he realized the magnitude of her interference in his most personal relationships. William's voice shook with fury as he confronted about her actions. He described the agony he had experienced trying to understand Kate's sudden announcement, not knowing that she had spent months crafting a thoughtful explanation that would have provided crucial context. had robbed him of the chance to hear Kate's true voice and had forced her to deliver devastating news without the careful preparation she had undertaken. The betrayal felt even deeper because William had trusted as a mother figure and advisor. She had been Charles's partner through their own relationship struggles, and William had believed she would understand the importance of honest communication between spouses. Instead, she had actively sabotaged his marriage by eliminating the very tool Kate had created to bridge their communication gap. As William's anger intensified, realized that she had not only damaged her relationship with Kate, but had also permanently destroyed William's trust in her. Her confession, meant to ease her guilt and possibly help William understand the situation better, had instead revealed her to be someone capable of devastating betrayal. The royal family bonds she had hoped to protect through her actions were now irreparably damaged. Attempted to defend her actions by emphasizing her concern for the monarchy's reputation and her fear of public scandal. She argued that Kate's departure would have created precisely the kind of media frenzy that the royal family had worked so hard to avoid. However, William pointed out that interference had made the situation infinitely worse by destroying any possibility of a dignified private resolution. William realized that Kate's missing letter explained her frantic searching and her obvious distress beyond what their conversation alone would have caused. Kate had been looking for her carefully crafted explanation, not knowing that someone she trusted had violated her privacy and destroyed her attempts at honest communication. The additional pain had caused Kate through this violation felt like a personal attack on William's family. The conversation between William and grew increasingly heated as more implications of her actions became clear. William understood that Kate's harsh-seeming announcement had been stripped of its context and explanation, making her appear callous when she had actually tried to be kind and understanding. Had eliminated Kate's expressions of love, gratitude, and hope for William's future happiness, leaving only the painful decision itself. William also realized that actions had made his own response to Kate's announcement less compassionate than it might have been. Had he read her letter, he would have understood the gradual evolution of her thoughts and the pain she felt about their failing marriage. Instead, her verbal explanation had seemed sudden and shocking, causing him to react with confusion and hurt rather than understanding and support. As the full scope of the damage became apparent, William's anger transformed into something colder and more final. He told that her actions represented an unforgivable betrayal of both Kate and himself. She had violated the most basic principles of trust and respect that held their family together. William made it clear that their relationship would never recover from this revelation. His attempts to apologize fell on deaf ears as William processed the destruction she had caused. Her interference had not only invaded Kate's privacy, but had also poisoned his ability to respond to his wife's needs with understanding and compassion. The letter might have helped them navigate their separation with dignity and mutual respect, but had eliminated that possibility entirely. The immediate aftermath of William's discovery left him reeling with multiple layers of betrayal and loss. He was losing his marriage to a woman he still loved deeply, and he had just learned that someone he trusted had actively sabotaged his ability to handle that loss with grace and understanding. The pain of Kate's decision was now compounded by the knowledge that had made everything worse through her interference. William's mind raced as he considered how to tell Kate about's confession. Kate deserved to know what had happened to her letter, but the revelation would likely cause her additional pain and anger. She had already been violated by having her private thoughts read without permission, and learning about the letter's destruction would compound that violation. William dreaded adding to Kate's suffering, but he knew she had a right to understand what had happened. The practical implications of his actions were staggering. William realized that every conversation he and Kate had shared since her announcement had been tainted by the missing context of her letter. They had been trying to communicate across a gap created by his interference, leading to misunderstandings and additional hurt that might have been avoided. The damage to their relationship was now even more extensive than either of them had realized. As William struggled to process this new information, he began to understand that betrayal extended beyond the destruction of a single letter. She had demonstrated a willingness to interfere in his most personal relationships based on her own judgment about what was best for the royal family. This paternalistic attitude suggested that she viewed him as incapable of handling his own marital problems and making appropriate decisions about his future. The revelation also casts recent behavior in a new light. William now understood that her unusual sympathy and support had been motivated by guilt rather than genuine concern. She had been trying to compensate for her actions without confessing them, adding deception to her original betrayal. Every interaction they had shared since the letter's destruction had been tainted by her secret knowledge of what she had done. William's relationship with Kate was already damaged beyond repair, but confession had eliminated any remaining hope for a dignified resolution. The trust and communication that might have allowed them to separate with mutual respect had been undermined by outside interference. Instead of ending their marriage as partners who still cared for each other, they would now have to navigate the additional pain of betrayal and violation. As the immediate shock of confession began to fade, William was left with the devastating task of deciding what to do next. He needed to tell Kate about her letter, knowing that the revelation would cause her additional anguish. He also had to consider the implications for his relationship with and her future role in the royal family. The woman he had trusted as a stepmother and advisor had revealed herself to be capable of devastating betrayal. The weight of multiple betrayals and losses threatened to overwhelm William as he contemplated his next steps. His marriage was ending, his trust was shattered, and his children's lives were about to be upended by scandal and separation. The royal life that had once felt stable and predictable had become a nightmare of deception and pain, with no clear path forward that would not cause additional suffering for everyone involved. The hours following his confession passed in a blur of shock and anguish for William. He sat alone in his private office, staring at the walls as he tried to process the full magnitude of what he had learned. The woman he had gradually come to trust as a stepmother had not only betrayed that trust, but had actively sabotaged his marriage during its most critical moment. The pain of Kate's decision to leave had been devastating enough, but knowing that someone had interfered with their ability to communicate honestly made the situation infinitely worse. William's hands shook as he reached for his phone to call Kate. She deserved to know immediately what had happened to her missing letter, though he dreaded causing her additional pain. The conversation would be one of the most difficult of his life, requiring him to reveal another layer of betrayal while she was already struggling with their marital crisis. He knew that learning about's actions would likely destroy any remaining possibility of maintaining family relationships after their separation. Kate answered the phone with obvious concern in her voice, having noticed William's distressed state throughout the day. When William asked if they could meet privately to discuss something urgent about her missing letter, Kate's heart began to race. She had almost given up hope of finding the document, but William's tone suggested that he had discovered something significant and deeply troubling about its disappearance. They met in the garden behind Kensington Palace, away from potential listening ears and prying eyes. The autumn evening was cold and gray, matching the somber mood as William struggled to find words for what he needed to tell Kate. He looked exhausted and devastated, even worse than he had appeared during their original conversation about their marriage. Kate felt a growing sense of dread as she waited for him to speak. William began by apologizing for what he was about to tell her, knowing that the revelation would cause her tremendous pain. He explained that he had discovered what happened to her letter, but that the truth was worse than either of them could have imagined. Kate listened with mounting horror as William described his confession, her violation of Kate's privacy, and the ultimate destruction of the letter that had contained her most personal thoughts and feelings. The impact of William's words hit Kate like a physical blow. She had spent days searching for her letter, wondering if she had misplaced it or if someone had accidentally moved it. Learning that had deliberately entered her private space, read her intimate thoughts, and then destroyed her attempts at honest communication felt like a violation beyond anything she had previously experienced. The betrayal cut even deeper than her marital problems had done. Kate's initial shock quickly transformed into rage as the full implications of his actions became clear. Not only had someone invaded her privacy in the most intimate way possible, but they had also sabotaged her attempt to handle her marriage crisis with dignity and kindness. The letter had been her way of explaining her decision gradually and lovingly, but had eliminated that possibility and forced Kate to deliver devastating news without the careful context she had prepared. As Kate processed the information, she realized that interference had made their recent conversations much more painful than necessary. Without the letter to provide understanding and context, Kate's verbal explanation had seemed harsh and sudden, causing William additional confusion and hurt. Had poisoned their ability to communicate during the most critical moment of their relationship. eliminating any chance for a dignified resolution to their marriage. William watched helplessly as Kate struggled with the revelation, knowing that his own betrayal of trust in confiding in had contributed to this disaster. He had turned to for advice about his marriage, never imagining that she was the person responsible for making the situation worse. His trust in her judgment had been completely misplaced, and now both he and Kate were paying the price for his poor choice of confidant. Kate's anger extended beyond the violation of her privacy to encompass the broader implications of his actions. By destroying the letter, had demonstrated a shocking level of arrogance and control, believing that she had the right to determine what was best for Kate and William's marriage. The paternalistic assumption that she knew better than they did about their own relationship was deeply insulting and revealed a fundamental lack of respect for their autonomy. The conversation between William and Kate continued for hours as they tried to process the full scope of his betrayal. They realized that every interaction since the letter's destruction had been tainted by her secret knowledge of Kate's private thoughts. Her recent expressions of sympathy and support had been motivated by guilt rather than genuine care, adding another layer of deception to her original violation. As they talked, William and Kate found themselves united in their anger toward, creating an unexpected moment of connection amid their marital crisis. The shared experience of betrayal temporarily bridged the gap that had grown between them, allowing them to communicate with greater honesty and understanding than they had managed in months. Ironically, this interference had achieved the opposite of her intended goal by bringing them closer together in their mutual outrage. Kate began to understand that William's initial reaction to her decision had been influenced by the missing context of her letter. His confusion and hurt had been by elimination of the gentle explanation Kate had crafted. This realization allowed Kate to feel more compassion for William's response and to recognize that their communication problems had been made worse by outside interference. William, in turn, gained a deeper appreciation for the violation Kate had experienced through the destruction of her letter. He understood that she had put tremendous emotional energy into crafting a message that would help him understand her perspective, only to have that effort stolen and destroyed by someone they both trusted. The loss of her carefully chosen words represented a form of theft that went beyond the physical destruction of paper and ink. As their conversation progressed, both William and Kate realized that actions had implications far beyond their personal relationship. Her willingness to interfere in such an intimate matter suggested that she viewed herself as having authority over their private lives that extended well beyond her official role in the royal family. This revelation raised serious questions about her future involvement in family decisions and her respect for appropriate boundaries. The discussion inevitably turned to the question of what consequences should face for her actions. Both William and Kate felt that the betrayal was too severe to ignore or forgive easily, but they also recognized the complexity of addressing the situation within the royal family structure. Any public revelation of his actions would create exactly the kind of scandal she had claimed to be trying to prevent, potentially damaging the monarchy's reputation. Kate expressed her desire for a formal acknowledgement of wrongdoing and a guarantee that such interference would never happen again. She wanted to understand the full impact of her actions and to face meaningful consequences for violating their trust. However, Kate also recognized that any punishment would need to be handled carefully to avoid creating additional problems for the royal family. William struggled with his own feelings torn between his anger at her betrayal and his understanding of her long relationship with his father. He knew that any action he took against would affect Charles and potentially create a rift within the family that could have lasting consequences. However, he also felt that allowing such a serious violation to go unpunished would set a dangerous precedent for future interference. As they continued to discuss the situation, William and Kate began to develop a plan for addressing his actions while protecting their own interests and those of their children. They agreed that needed to face consequences for her behavior, but they wanted to handle the matter privately to avoid creating additional scandal and drama. Their shared goal was to prevent future interference while maintaining some semblance of family unity. The revelation of his betrayal had paradoxically created an opportunity for William and Kate to communicate more honestly than they had in months. United in their anger and hurt, they were able to discuss their relationship problems with greater understanding and mutual support. While Kate's decision to separate remained unchanged, the context provided by learning about her destroyed letter allowed them to approach their future with less bitterness and more cooperation. As the evening progressed, both William and Kate felt a complex mixture of emotions. The betrayal was devastating, but it had also provided them with clarity about what had happened to their relationship. They could now distinguish between the problems that had developed naturally within their marriage and the additional damage caused by outside interference. This understanding would be crucial as they worked to rebuild their relationship as co-parents and former partners. The conversation ended with William and Kate making a commitment to handle their separation with the dignity and respect that actions had tried to undermine. They would not allow her betrayal to poison their ability to maintain a positive relationship for the sake of their children and their own healing. Instead, they would use the experience as motivation to communicate more honestly and to protect their family from future interference. As they parted that evening, both William and Kate carried the heavy knowledge of betrayal alongside their existing marital problems. However, they also shared a renewed sense of partnership in protecting their family's interests and ensuring that their children's welfare remained the primary consideration throughout the separation process. The destruction of Kate's letter had caused tremendous pain, but it had also revealed important truths about trust, communication, and the boundaries that needed to be maintained within their extended family. The future remained uncertain for William and Kate, but they now faced it with a clearer understanding of what had gone wrong and who was responsible for making their situation worse. Interference had failed to save their marriage, but the revelation of her actions had at least restored their ability to communicate with honesty and mutual respect. From the ashes of Kate's destroyed letter, they would build a new foundation for their post-marriage relationship, one based on transparency and protection of their shared values and priorities.